people do business with people. They don't do business with ideas or products or strategies or tactics or money. They do business with people. So until you learn to get the people part right, good luck being as effective a leader as you could be.
Today, I've got a very special guest for you. I'm so excited about this episode with Carole Robin, who's a PhD, responsible for teaching legendary interpersonal dynamics. Now, this was at Stanford Graduate School of Business. So thinking about interpersonal concepts and emotions and connection has been really complicated for a lot of business owners. And Carole is dubbed the Queen of Touchy Feely and got awards for being one of the leaders at a life-changing course at a business school about emotions. This conversation is about emotional intelligence, but it's also about why emotional intelligence can shift your business, your relationships, your money, your family, all of the things that you want. It's probably hidden behind a couple of tactics that Carole outlines. Not only that, but Carole has written a great book called Connect, Building Exceptional Relationships with Family, Friends, and Colleagues. And what I've gathered about this book, I highly recommend it for you, is that the breakdown of connection, the simplicity of connection is also the simplest road to better leadership. So if you're in a leadership position, if you're in the business of people, and you are definitely in the business of people because you don't buy things from businesses, you buy them from people, this episode is going to be for you. Welcome to the show, Carole Robin. You've got a lot of experience with leaders. You've got a lot of experience with teaching. You got a lot of experience with relationships. That to me feels like the trifecta for creating change. Before we jumped on, you mentioned a question that you start with. And I'd love to just open the podcast with the question that you use to catalyze conversation, relation, connection.
Right. The question I always asked my students at Stanford to sit with for a year, that I ask our participants at Leaders in Tech now to sit in, that I ask my coaching clients to sit in, is why should anybody follow you?
So what do you hear normally? I have a sense I know what people say, but I'm curious what you see.
Most of the time, it kind of stops them in their tracks because they haven't actually really stopped to think about it. Often, they default to what they've learned about why people follow someone else. They usually have gone to school on other leaders, and they have learned what worked and didn't work for other leaders, which is one way to learn about leadership. No doubt, no question about that. But the fact is, I might look at what Sheryl Sandberg did and didn't do that made her effective, but I'm not Sheryl Sandberg. And so in the end, it becomes a much more personal, individual journey to answer that question for yourself. And the relationships that I'm going to create with the people who follow me are going to be different than the relationships those people create with other people they might follow.
I like this. You know, I've been exploring the ideas within leadership, and a place that I've come to recently because of some of the conflicts in coaching environments. Conflicts as in clients are navigating hardship or confusion, yes, or yes, insecurity.
Challenge.
And I'm learning how to help them through it. But a pattern that I've seen is that in order to get someone to follow, you need a leader. And if someone is going to follow a leader, that leader has to have a destination in mind.
Absolutely.
Right? A place that they want to go. And that's the barometer that I use to begin to talk about vision, right? If people say, hey, I want to be a leader, like, okay, well, where are you taking people?
Exactly.
Because leader, to me, has been attributed to characteristics, and I actually think it's a verb more than it is an adjective. What has been your take on, seeing the difference between like leadership as a role versus leadership as an act?
Well, I'm on the same page with you. And in fact, one of the things that I often say is that leadership is not a role function. It's a set of behaviors that you engage in, which means anybody can be a leader. Anybody can lead. You don't have to be in a particular position to lead. But depending on how you show up, and the kinds of relationships you develop with other people, and how good you are at inspiring them because you are clear on where you want to take them, to your point. The more you do that, the more effective a leader you're going to be, regardless of your role.
In organizations, I think that can be challenging because roles kind of complicate that and
Oh,
stuff.
yes.
But from the connection perspective, I really love the openness and not only can anybody be a leader, but you can create leadership through the lens of these certain behaviors. If you had to break those behaviors down, how would you describe them?
That goes to the core of all my work, which is how do you develop robust relationships in the first place? So if you think about it, relationships exist on a continuum. At one end of the continuum, there's contact and no connection. Those are your thousands of Facebook friends. Those are, and in or many organizational settings, that's the only kind of connection or relationship that exists between many, many people. Contact, no connection. At the other end of the continuum is something that in the book that my co-author and I wrote called Connect, that you've got featured up there. At the other end of the spectrum is something we came to call exceptional, which is, and I can come back and talk about what makes a relationship really exceptional. But what I think is important to note is I am not advocating that you need to turn all your relationships into something exceptional. That's impractical and unnecessary. That's not what makes a good leader. But you do have to get to the point where you get beyond contact and no connection to something that I might call just robust and functional. Because, by the way, at the end of contact and no connection is also dysfunction. So the skills that and competencies that we have to develop in order to move along the continuum can take us at least to robust and functional. And beyond that, if we want to continue to apply them and deepen them with certain people because we want to get all the way to exceptional, well, then we can. But at least we're armed with what we need in order to move to a productive place and to be an effective leader. I mean, the course that I taught at Stanford Business School, which was called Interpersonal Dynamics, also known as Touchy Feely. We can go back to that. Emphasis on the feely, not the touchy, because feelings are an important part of connecting. But that course is embedded in the leadership development curriculum at the Stanford Business School. It's not hidden away in some psych department. It is core to being an effective leader. And so the first one of those characteristics of a relationship that has moved along this continuum is that we both allow ourselves to be more known. I allow you to know me a little bit more. You allow me to know you a little bit more. And by the way, that tends to be reciprocal. The closer I hold my cards, the closer you're going to hold yours. And then we're going to be in contact and no connection. So as a leader, especially if I'm in a differentiated role and I'm in a role that by virtue of the role makes me a higher power person in that organization. If I'm the higher power person, it is incumbent on me to be the first person to share a little bit about myself. Because if I share a little bit about me, you are more likely to reciprocate and share a little bit about you.
Yeah. So go first. I like that.
So that's number one. Who starts? Role model the kind of behaviors that you want to see and the kind of engagement you want to see with each other. So allow each other to become more known and trust that the disclosures you make won't be used against you. Because that's the reason a lot of people don't share. Well, I don't know what you're going to do with that data. So that is why we don't go from 0 to 100 in 3.2 seconds. I tell you a little bit. You might tell me a little bit. We have a slightly bigger comfort zone with each other. Then I might tell you a little bit more. Then you might tell me a little bit more. So it's a gradual process. We build knowledge of each other over time. And by testing, well, I'm going to tell you this. It's not going to be my biggest risk ever. I'm going to take a little risk and I'm going to see what you do with it. And then once you've done that, so you both allow each other to be better known by each other. You trust each other. You are honest with each other. You keep it real, so to speak. So when I see you doing something that I think is that in fact, when I experience you doing something that harms me or the relationship, or I think is hurting you and your relationship with someone else, or is hurting the team, or is hurting the organization, I have to be honest with you and tell you that. Not be, I don't really want to swear, so I'm trying to
Oh,
think
you
of a
can
good
bring it
word,
here.
but
It's
I
all
don't
good.
want to be chicken shit and not tell you,
Yeah. Yeah. That's
right?
really important.
So I want to be honest, because if I'm willing to be honest, which is also a risk, you'll see the theme of risk here a lot. If I'm willing to be honest with you, that means I care enough about you and about us uh, to actually step outside my comfort zone. A lot of people, when they feel unhappy with something that someone else has done, they often will go to a place of it's not worth it. And I always say, take the word it and substitute that pronoun for I. I'm not worth it. You're not worth it. We aren't worth it. And then ask yourself again whether it's worth raising.
This is so good. Okay. So I want to go a very maybe roundabout way to a really important point that I think you can help a lot of people, specifically me, navigate my way through. I was reading about you and learning, because I always do that. And I found myself maybe most connected to this story of you running against your boyfriend at the time in high school for, was it council president?
It was for student council president. Yes.
Student council president. It's cool. So you're running against each other and like you beat him out, and he tried to slip it under as like, well, you should have been born a boy, right?
Actually, my mother was the one who said you should have been born a boy.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. So you won this out, right? And what I gleaned from that is that you had a spark, right? You had a bit of a fighter in you. And in the world of business and entrepreneurship and even leadership, and I'm sure even teaching, you kind of have to have this renegade, I'm going to go get what I want, a courage, a bravado, and an independence. And it's a common trait in anyone I've ever coached, especially CEOs. And a pattern that I notice even within myself is a tension between connection and independence. And
Yeah.
as I've organized businesses and run companies and built a team, there's a hesitation that I have to be wildly open with the team. And over the years, it's softened, but it's still there where I can hesitate to share for lack of having it all together, for lack of knowing everything, for having the answers, for feeling like I'm not worthy of running or leading. And I think there's a trait in entrepreneurship where connection and independence are seen as contradictory. Now, I don't believe that now, but I'd
Yeah.
love to hear your take on A, like, how do you think that happens? And then B, is there another way that we can think about connection and independence?
Well, I think there's a difference between independence and interdependence. So in a business, if we are both part of a business and we are both invested in some way in that business succeeding, and we both have something to contribute to its success, we are interdependent by definition. And if I try to remain too independent, then you're going to feel very, very insecure and unsure if you somehow feel in any way dependent on me. So now you're going to try to be independent too. So now we're both going to be doing our own thing when what we should be doing is being interdependent and helping each other out. Now, the other thing that came to mind as I was listening to you talk about this is that uh, there's a mental model that a lot of leaders hold that somehow all this squishy, peoply stuff, makes you less effective, or doesn't make you a strong leader, or I don't know. There's all kinds of interesting mental models that people hold. Um, and but the bottom line, and you and I were talking about this a moment ago, is that people in the end do business with people. They don't do business with ideas or products or strategies or tactics or money. They do business with people. So until you learn to get the people part right, good luck being as effective a leader as you could be.
I love interdependence. The idea of interdependence came to me after a wild year where I I eventually, like one morning I woke up and was like, I'm interdependent with the mailman, right? It was just like,
Exactly.
whoa, like, oh, we're actually all really connected. And, having learned about what your class has done for people, this also extends way beyond business, right? And I think
Yeah.
the challenge with entrepreneurship, or my challenge with entrepreneurship, is that it can be a phenomenal scapegoat for I struggle with connection. Because you can get so driven and
Oh,
so
yes.
excited about what you're building, and it's a mask, right? It's a prism that allows you to be like, you know what I actually want? I want to be so successful that I connect. But in the meantime, I'm going to dodge connections and I'm going to focus on this independence. You've had letters written to you saying that you've changed families, you've saved marriages, you've changed dynamics of teams. Like this course has, like, everything I've read about your history says that you've figured out an enigma that a lot of people have not. And the way I think about that is that you've cracked a code for how the people part of businesses function, and under any business is the people function.
Exactly.
How do you speak to someone that is an entrepreneur and a leader on paper, but is avoiding connection? How do you help them recognize that the people part of their business is the bottom part of the iceberg that they might completely be missing?
It's a really good question, and it's often an interesting challenge because somebody who truly does not believe that relationships matter in business is very unlikely to fall into my sphere. Yeah, they're not going to take my class. They're not going to come do Leaders in Tech. They're not going to pick up my book. They just don't think any of that matters. So, um, so then I start with, so what does matter to you? I always get curious in a situation like that. So, how did you come to that conclusion? Help me understand, you know, what, you know, what you do instead of, given that, the research would show that many, many leaders do engage in developing relationships as a way of being more effective. So, I'm not, I mean, you want to look at the research, I'll show you the research, but it's really more like, so where does this belief you hold so dearly come from? And what is that about for you? What can you allow for the possibility that as good and effective as you are, you could be even better and even more effective if you actually learned how to develop strong relationships with the people in your world? Can you allow for the possibility that you might be happier and more fulfilled in your marriage or your relationship with your kids or your friendships? Because by the way, we show up as the human being we are in all these settings. So if I don't value a relationship at work, do I value relationship at home?
It's a good point. Yeah, you either do or you don't. It's pretty simple.
And maybe some people say, well, there's a place for relationship at home and there's not a place for relationship at work. Um, and then I say, well, what does the relationship do for you at home? Does it help you navigate conflict better? Does it help you motivate each other more? Does it help you uh, feel like you're moving together towards something more? I mean, so why would it not do that at work too?
Right. Yeah, maybe different parameters, but it does the same thing. The function is the same. You know,
Exactly.
I was going through different pieces of your book, and I hear curiosity in that. I also hear like your methodology, probably very similar to mine, is quite Socratic, right? Just ask these tough questions and let someone arrive at the conclusion. Because if you tell them the answer, they don't get the answer, right?
Or you create too much dependence.
Nice. The But I'm gonna cruise through a couple different topics that might
Sure.
give someone at home that's listening, or wherever you may be listening, like some things to think about that are perhaps the crunchy in the feely, that
Yes. Yes.
tracks. So one of them you have is like a 15% rule, which kind of goes to this piece of curiosity and risk and creating connection. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. It also goes to the whole disclosure thing where we started, the whole topic of disclosure. So we all have, think of 3 concentric circles. The circle in the middle is your comfort zone, where you say things that you don't even think twice about. The circle on the very outside is the danger zone. In a million years, I'd never say that to you or share that or ask you that. But the circle in the middle is what we call the learning zone. So, and this comes from educational research. You can't learn anything new if you don't step outside your comfort zone. But you also can't learn, and entrepreneurs know that better than almost anybody. But you also can't learn anything new if you're so freaked out that you're in your danger zone that you become a deer in headlights. So you have to find, the learning zone in the situation and in the moment. But the students used to say, but Carole, the minute I step outside my comfort zone, how do I know I'm not in my danger zone? How do I know I'm in my learning zone? So we used to say, step a little bit outside your comfort zone, 15%. That's why it's the 15% rule. You'll feel it in your body. You'll feel it in the
Oh
palms
yeah,
of your
I
hands
know
or the
that
back of
moment
your
very
neck.
well.
You'll feel a little agitated. But if I step only 15% outside my comfort zone in providing a piece of feedback to you, for example, then I'm unlikely to freak myself or you out because I've only gotten a little bit outside my comfort zone. If I step 15% outside my comfort zone by sharing something with you in the service of better disclosure and connection, I'm also unlikely to freak us both out. And an interesting thing happens. If I step 15% outside my comfort zone, you're more likely to step 15% outside yours. And now the comfort zone you and I share is a little bit bigger than it was before by 15%. Now we can go 15% beyond that. And that's how we grow and deepen a relationship a little bit at a time in a thoughtful and intentional way.
Yeah, I love how this is starting to scaffold too, right? There is an interdependence to that. We have to both do it and
Exactly.
subscribe to it. I also really like the idea of, baby risk and baby steps. Uh, the phrase I use that you define the learning zone, I call the growth plate, and I think
Exactly.
there's a beautiful tension that many entrepreneurs, to your point, are quite confident in and maybe trust the result. There's a hesitation to do the thing,
Yes.
but they can at least understand the result.
Yeah.
So I love that. And I want to go another layer. So now we're moving at these 15% clips, right? We're
Right.
slowly
And before you
expanding.
do that, one more thing.
Well, please.
Um, Another element of a relationship that's moved down the continuum is that we're both invested in each other's learning.
Nice.
So that's another characteristic of a relationship that's moved from contact, no connection, or dysfunction to robust and functional.
Marvelous. So there's this pursuit of more, right? This
Yes.
we're,
Let's
we're
make each other better.
yeah, like we're both invested in this. The mutuality I love. Something that strikes me. I was recording a show on essentially outgrowing your role and what it
Oh, yeah.
means to really pursue authenticity. And I've read that authenticity is something important to this robust uh, end of the spectrum when it comes to
Yes.
relationships. Authenticity has been a big challenge for me. Not that I walk around fake all the time, but as I grow and as I've grown as an entrepreneur, I've recognized that the role that I was in became limiting, and I'd shed it, and then I got bigger and bigger and
Yep.
bigger, and to outgrow a role can feel really scary. And to be authentic in today's world, I think, is a beautiful thing, and sometimes a very costly thing.
And a scary thing.
Hella scary. It is probably the scariest thing I encounter is this like radical authenticity. And there's the other end of authenticity where you're so loud and so boisterous that it's another act, right? But
Yeah,
in
it's not
that
really authentic.
right, yeah, it's just like another character. And in that, like I really recognize the value of authenticity, but sometimes it feels that my role as an entrepreneur, my role as a coach can be preventative of that. I'll give you an example, and then I really want to hear your thoughts. In the last couple of years, I've gone through a tremendous bit of difficulty in the journey of fatherhood. Like I've had to fight to be able to see my kid in a meaningful way. And there were days where I was crumbling. Like I was emotionally broken. I was being beat down financially. I was doubtful of this future. I was scared. And it was important for me not to try to fake it. And it was also important not to like show up and dump that on a client, right? That's my responsibility. I'm showing
Absolutely.
up for them. But I also found that a little bit to your 15% rule was actually important for that person to see me as a human and not just like
Exactly.
Coach Aaron. But that was so scary. Like it was incredibly intimidating to kind of like peel the kimono off a bit. What advice would you give to someone that maybe is stuck behind a very tight roped kimono where they're afraid, maybe there's recourse or they've experienced recourse and they're distrusting of the entire idea of being authentic, or they're trapped in their role?
Well, one of the things that I often talk about in my work is there's a difference between authenticity, meaning I tell you everything, and appropriate authenticity, which is that I share with you what is germane and important for you to know about me in this situation right now. So let me give you an example. I'm the VP of marketing. We've lost share 3 months in a row. I stand up in front of all the troops and I say, well, we're crushing it. No problem. No credibility. I stand up in front of the troops and say, well, 3rd month in a row, we've lost share. I have no idea why. I don't know what we should do about it. I'm not sure I should be your VP of marketing. That is inappropriate authenticity. But I can stand up in front of the troops and say, okay, no surprise. Lost share 3 months in a row. I wish I could stand here and tell you exactly what we should do about it and what's happening and why, but I can't. And I've never needed all of you more. Now, which of those 3 leaders would you rather follow?
Yeah.
Okay.
Easy. I'm
No
taking number
blaming.
3. Door number 3.
And I've got an entrepreneur who was a member of one of our cohorts at Leaders in Tech, who reached out to me not too long ago to say, oh my God, I have to share this story with you. We missed a major deadline on a Friday night, and I spent all weekend furious at my team, just furious at my team. And it's Monday morning, of course, is all hands meetings. And so I was getting ready to blast them all on Monday morning. And then I remembered one of the things that I learned from you and all that stuff we learned about feelings is that some feelings are connecting and some feelings are distancing, and that anger tends to be a distancing feeling, and that underneath anger, there's often other feelings that are more vulnerable. And so then I stopped and thought about what was really going on, and I realized what I was scared. I was scared that I was the only person who saw how catastrophic this missed deadline was. So on Monday morning, instead of blasting them and ripping them apart, I stood up in front of them and said, so I spent all weekend furious at you. And in the end, upon further reflection, here's what I realized. What I realized is that I'm scared, that I'm the only person who is as worried about this missed deadline as I am. And he said, Carole, this is a 4-time entrepreneur. This is his 4th startup. He said, I have never had a team of people rally to fix a problem faster.
Wow. Wow.
So that's appropriate authenticity.
Yeah. Like I really appreciate the distinction. I do think that this is definitely not a politically correct statement, but there's a whole lot of like dumping of emotion and trauma and pain. Even the word trauma gets used way too flippant much. We've made everything, I really believe this, we've made everything so sensitively fragile
that we've stopped talking to each other.
Yeah, stop being authentic, right? Appropriately authentic. And I think it is critical for leaders to be able to cut the shit, own their own thing, but not dump it. Like, don't dump it out. Like, own it and take the time to do it. Now, here's another bit of questioning that goes along with this. A pattern that I see in leaders, CEOs, number 2s, managers, etc. And this can certainly be amplified by culture, but I do see it at the top more than anything, is the refusal to zoom out, the difficulty zooming out. They're moving. So the comfort zone for them is high velocity, stay busy, move all the time, make decisions fast, blah, 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 blah. And like as a perpetuation of that, when put into a highly emotional state. They become more reactive.
Yes.
And rather than slow down and say, hey, phew, I'm angry. Wait a minute. What am I angry about? What's underneath the anger, right? And really do the reflection to be able to appropriately be authentic. They double down on reactivity and speed. How do you help someone recognize the value of space, of reflection, when the world is moving so fast that the predisposition to rush and be urgent takes over what creates the moment of reflection that allows authenticity?
Well, I think there's a couple places I might go in a situation like that. The first is one of my favorite questions of clients is, how are the behaviors you're currently engaging in serving you? And how, if at all, might they be costing you? So just ask them to pause long enough to reflect on the choices they're making and how those choices are serving them, because they wouldn't be making them if they were serving them
Correct.
in some
They're
way.
working, quote unquote.
And might they be costing you at all? Might be, and part of what happens when you're that frenetic and just moving from one thing to the next is that you run past your choices.
Amen.
You don't even recognize you had any choices at different junctures.
This is me circa 2019 and 2020. Keep
Me
on
too.
going.
Me too. So I've been there. I've lived that. And one of the kindest things, one of the coaches on my team who worked on my team with me at Stanford ever said to me was, Carole, you've got to slow down and stop running past your choices. So, but I have to recognize that there are choices to be made in the first place. And sometimes somebody has to stop me in my tracks and say, okay, did you ever stop to think there was a different choice there? And what might have happened if you had?
Yeah. When I really look back at those moments, not only was I rushing and frenetic, I didn't believe there were other options.
Right. That's part of the reason. So one of the reasons, there's many, but one of the reasons people don't slow down is they're afraid to slow down. They're afraid
Yes.
of what they might actually notice if they slow down.
Yes. Guaranteed. Yep. Me and everyone I've ever coached is in that boat.
And so, there again, it's like, how is the fear is serving you because it's protecting you. But what cost are you paying for it? And by the way, unless you're willing to confront the fear and test its validity, you'll be trapped in it forever. So one of the ways we learn and grow as human beings is by testing some of our beliefs and assumptions that we developed very early in our careers and haven't tested for a long time. And I went to work for the largest industrial automation company in the world as the first woman hired into a non-clerical job. This was a long time ago. The dinosaurs had just only recently stopped roaming the earth. And I learned at that time that if I was going to be successful, I was going to have to leave my feelings parked in the parking lot. And I got very good at it. And it served me really well until 10 years later, I had gotten promoted many times. I was running a $50 million region. I had 6 guys who worked for me. For those of you who are not guys listening to this podcast, I did finally fix that, but I hadn't yet at the time of this anecdote. And I got a little worked up about something. And one of my guys leaned in and said, "Oh my God, Carole, are you going to cry?" But then he said, "Are you human after all? Are you human after all?" And then I said, "You don't think I'm effing human? I don't think there's anything more important for us to talk about than that." And I ripped up our agenda for the next 2-day offsite. And that's what we spent 2 days talking about. To this day, I believe that was the day I became a leader. And I know those 6 guys would follow me anywhere and did follow me. And I mean, the fact was, if I'd burst out crying 6 months into the job, I would have never even gotten to where I got eventually. But I was so stuck in an old mental model that I had to show up a certain way, that it had stopped serving me a long time ago and had now started costing me big time. They didn't even see me as human. Why are you going to follow a robot?
I feel like we're like approaching a time in history where like that's a really poignant question.
I think you're right. And I think that there are some human beings who, unless they learn to differentiate themselves from robots, are going to be out of business.
Yes, yes, and more yes. Absolutely. This is where the authenticity play becomes much more magnified, right? The next 10 years are going to see a distinction between what is authentic and what is artificial.
Exactly.
And man, I think people are in for a world of people problems as this accelerates.
Couldn't agree with you more.
I've been puzzled by a recent challenge with a client where what they're encountering is stress and burnout on their team. There's a lot of misfirings. There's a lot of role blur and a lot of things need to change. And I'm excited to go in and look under the hood, take it apart, put it back together. It's going to be a big undertaking for us, but a meaningful one. And part of the symptom that I see there, and I've seen it in dozens of companies, is this challenge with feedback. And feedback is a critical part of authenticity. It's also the most fundamental piece of growth that I've personally ever experienced.
Absolutely.
When someone can be like, "Hey, you're not good at that." If it comes from the right person or the right way or the right time, whatever, then I can go. As an entrepreneur, I have to be like a rhino where I only move forward and my skin is tough enough where you can say whatever you want. And in a way, I can leverage that. There was a book that got published that I really think it just had been a paper. It was overwhelmingly long for a very simple idea. And the book was called Anti-Fragile. Some systems are fragile, meaning that when stress is applied, the system gets weaker.
Yeah.
Anti-fragile.
Yeah.
When stress is applied to a system, the system gets stronger.
That which fire doesn't burn, it hardens.
Yes. And like it was a long book for that. I believe that entrepreneurs by nature, though I think this comes from pain in their history, are anti-fragile. They will respond really well and get stronger through the lens of stress added to a system. But then when they go to give feedback, they expect everyone to have the same kind of rhino hide where they've endured this same kind of forging that usually the entrepreneur does. If someone is in the process of growing their team, their business, and they know that they need to give feedback better, could you walk us through a couple pointers that allow for connection and make it less of like a ripping party?
Well, actually, feedback well given builds relationship. It doesn't destroy it. It doesn't weaken it. It makes it stronger.
I'm so excited for this.
So the problem with most people don't know how to give feedback in a way that actually is effective and productive. So if you're and we're going to come back to feelings here. If I can use feelings effectively in my communication with you when I give you a piece of feedback, I will say something like, you know, Aaron, when you not that you did this, by the way, but when we were talking and you interrupted me, I felt disappointed. Now I'm owning what happened to me. I'm telling you what you did. And then I add, and I'm telling you this because this is the important part. My intent in telling you this is because I want to keep engaging and having more conversations. And if you keep interrupting me, I'm going to be less and less inclined to share anything. So it's a formula. When you do X, I feel Y. And this is why in the book, there's an appendix called The Vocabulary of Feelings, because most people don't even know what they're feeling. All they know is to make an attribution or impute a motive. I feel that you didn't care to hear what I had to say. There's not a feeling word in there. So in order to do this right, you have to drop the that and the like. I feel that, I feel like. You can't grammatically correctly express a feeling if you say I feel that or I feel like. I feel disappointed. I feel annoyed. I feel hurt. I feel sad. Insert feeling word. I feel angry. I feel frustrated. And I'm telling you this because my intent is what I hope the outcome of this conversation is. And if you do those three things when you give somebody feedback, it will build a stronger relationship. And that's why the being honest with each other is such a critical piece of moving down the continuum. Because if you're armed with the skill to do it, you will be much more honest with each other and you'll have better outcomes as a result.
I love that frame. I've assigned the emotional wheel to a number of clients, 40, 50 years like plus. Like, and you would think, well, you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s. Like, don't you know this? But nobody teaches this shit.
No,
You're
no,
just
no,
like,
no. And in
I have no idea.
fact, our ability to access what's going on for us, our emotions, is socialized out of us from a young age. So we have to find it again, and we have to train ourselves back into that space. And that's why I used to love when I used to teach the course at Stanford, I used to love walking around campus, and I could always tell who was taking the class because they would walk around with the laminated vocabulary of feelings.
I love that.
But the feelings become key in this. And what happens when you use a feeling is you embed disclosure in your feedback. You learn something about me and you learn something about yourself when I give you feedback well. And then we learn something, and in that I make myself a little more vulnerable too.
Yeah. Okay. So here's an interesting route to go. That requires two people to both be subscribed. And
yes and no.
I've had a couple of moments where I've framed it, I have created it, I've installed it, I've been gentle, I've owned my part, but I've communicated really well, and it can create a lightning storm. And I've had a hard time deducing whether there's just a person that isn't willing to receive feedback, or it was a minutia of details that I could have said differently. But eventually then I just landed a place where I'm like, well, I can only soften it so well. I can only frame it so well before a person has to be able to receive the mail. What's your take on that?
Well, I think some people are more immediately receptive than others. I think some people are more sensitive than others. And I'll go back to inquiry curiosity. You don't know what's going on for the other person. So when you get a reaction that doesn't make sense to you, when you've delivered feedback that you think you delivered really thoughtfully and intentionally, and you did it the way I just said, and you included your feelings and the specific behavior and your intent, and they respond in a way that just doesn't seem to in any way indicate that it landed in any way. The first place to go is to say, what did you hear me say? 9 times out of 10, what they will respond with is not what you believe you said. I walk into the kitchen and I say to my husband, can I help you with that? Because I see him struggling. And he says, don't tell me what to do. So, and a story that's been told a million times. So I can say, I wasn't trying to tell you what to do. And, why are you so sensitive? And we could get into a whole big thing. Or I could say, what did you hear me say? And he said to me, true story, I heard you say I didn't know what I was doing. Well, it doesn't matter that that's not what I said. What matters is that's what he heard. And if I hadn't asked, what did you hear me say? Then we would have gotten into a whole escalated thing. And I said, well, gosh, I'm really glad I asked. I didn't say that's not what I said. I said, I'm really glad I asked. Now I understand why you said what you said. So one of the ways that I show somebody I love them is if I see them struggling, I offer to help. What do you want me to do when I see you struggling? He said, wait for me to ask. That was 35 years ago. We've been married 40 years. So it's a really powerful question. What did you hear me say?
I'm really fascinated by all of this. I mean, I feel like you and I could talk about this for a long time because we're sort of playing in the same field, but also because this has been my personal journey also, right? The growth of this, to know how to communicate, how to share, how to own my own feelings. I mean, this has been a whole unpacking of Pandora's box in a lot of ways. I'm curious how you would define EQ, emotional intelligence. How would you define it to someone that's like, I hear it all the time, but like, what's it mean?
It's a really good question. I think it's a combination of self-knowledge and, and understanding your triggers and understanding what, um, your own reactions. I and it's also, on the self part of it, it's about, um, getting to know yourself well enough to have a sense of how you're going to react to certain things so that you can be more intentional and thoughtful in your reactions. I think it's also about learning how to meet others emotionally. And that's, we're back to why feelings in the touchy feely feelings part is so important, because in the absence of feelings, we can't really connect. And we get in trouble. If you tell me you're really angry about something, about X, and I can't ever imagine being angry about X, I can't relate to you along the lines of X, but I can relate to you along the lines of anger. I have felt anger before. So I understand anger. So I can meet you emotionally without having to meet you at the issue of at the level of an issue or an idea at all. And I think the more the higher your EQ, the more, the more well versed you are in the world and vocabulary of feelings, the more access you have to your own feelings, and the better you are able to, uh, exchange feelings with others and hear theirs.
So as a through line, EQ is essentially all the skills we just talked about and all the leadership components that we just talked through. Uh, Aside from your book, where can people like how do you develop it? What advice would you give to someone that's like, yeah, I definitely need to work on that?
Well, aside from the book, there are other things that I'm involved in. So, especially if you're in tech in any way, and by the way, most people are involved in tech in some way. After I left Stanford in 2017, I co-founded a startup that's a nonprofit, called Leaders in Tech, www.leadersintech.org. And we have a number of different programs, which start out with what's akin to Touchy Feely on steroids. 4-day program, immersion programs. And then we got programs that go on for much longer. And then you get the whole Carole Robin curriculum. But, so that's one avenue. Another one is go to the book website. Even if you don't get the book, go to the book website, connectandrelate.com, and you'll see activities as in a drop-down menu, and download the assessment. You can do the assessment yourself, and it asks you a bunch of questions that helps you determine just how interpersonally competent are you. And then give it to a few people in your life and compare their answers to your answers.
Nice.
And then see what areas of
Where the gap
interpersonal
is.
competence you might need to work on.
Nice.
It's also got a form your own study group, got all these are free downloadable things, that you can do. And, when my co-author and I were approached to write the book in the first place, we were resistant because we said, you're not going to learn to be interpersonally competent by reading about it. You're going to actually have to go do something with another human being in order to get better. And he said, well, how are you okay with the only people getting to learn all of these tools and everything being those that are lucky enough and privileged enough to go to the Stanford Graduate School of Business? That's when David and I said, well, I guess we're going to have to write a book. But we did not write an academic book. We did not write a textbook. We wrote a book that we tried to make as accessible as possible, particularly because at the end of every chapter, there's a section called Deepen Your Learning with actual homework things to go do with other people in your life, as a way of applying, as it implies, what you just learned. I also recommend, if you're trying to get up the learning curve in terms of being more interpersonally competent, keeping a journal. It doesn't have to be like every day, write an hour, but keep a journal where you write down every time you have an exchange that went the way you wanted it. Take a few minutes and think about what happened. What did I say? What did the other person say? How did we end up in this good place? And likewise with the ones that don't work. This was a disaster conversation. What happened? First I said this, then they said that, then I said this, and see if you can start doing your own diagnosing of what's happening with you and for you when when connection is happening and disconnection is happening.
I've journaled a lot about the negative examples. I really like the idea of the positive examples. That sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
I'm in the midst of
and then look for patterns. Look for patterns because you'll see the flip side of one.
Yeah. Follow the breadcrumbs. I'm in the middle of some personal dynamic shifts that have required me to really show up. And one of the tools that I've used in that is to be like, I'm not ready to have this conversation. And, I've been slowly and in a cascading manner journaling about them because they're very complex. And maybe a piece of advice I would give to anybody listening in tandem with yours, Carole, is like, sometimes it just takes time.
Yeah.
Because I never learned to do this young. And even though I'm highly proficient at it professionally, sometimes my own emotions are so complex and tied to things that like, it feels like a giant ball. And as I uncovered, I'm like, well, that ball doesn't really belong in here. That's from a totally different thing. And I have to slowly unravel this. And sometimes the best decision is no decision when it comes to like confronting the issue. And
that's, by the way, that's EQ too. It's also EQ to say, you know what? I'm not ready to have that conversation right now. You know what? I've got to do some more thinking about this and sorting out what's actually going on for me before I'm ready to engage with it in a different way. Those are all elements of EQ too.
Well, I'll take the nod. Heck yeah. EQ has a special place in my heart. My son's first two initials are EQ. For a lot of affinity towards this kind of thing. And so not only do I have a favoring of this subject and this, the efficacy of it and what it can do for the world, but this is also what I love to support and celebrate.
And of course, all the works by Daniel Goleman. You want to learn more about EQ. He's like the father of EQ.
Love that. I'm the father of EQ. Don't replace me. Carole, this is magic. I really love this subject, and maybe we need a part 2 at some point to dig even deeper.
I'd be delighted.
Where can someone learn more about you? Where can they pick up the book? What can we do to support you?
Thank you. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn if you want, or you can go to the connectandrelate.com website, or you can go, the best way to send me an email is carole@leadersintech.org. There's a bunch of stuff on my LinkedIn site. I post often. And so that and the book website also has under media a bunch of articles that we've written, other podcasts, and materials to avail yourself of. So yeah, I would say those would be the main ways to find out more about me and how to contact me.
I highly recommend that you do. Carole knows her stuff. She's also got, a lot of time in the trenches dealing with this in ways that I can only aspire to have.
I'm old.
I've been doing this for a long time, what feels like a long time. And then I feel, even excited for what it could look like to be as studied and accomplished in a field as you have. So I'm so grateful for the time today. Like, this is meaningful for me, and I'm sure will be meaningful for others. So reach out, say hello to Carole, check out her book. I highly recommend that you engage with that initial assessment. That could be a really good place for you to start with your team, with your friends, with your close peers, your family. Tremendous way to open it. I think anytime you can get awareness about the gaps, it can be painful or scary, but it is beautiful. So start there. Carole, thank you so much for coming in today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's really meaningful and a privilege for me too, to have an opportunity to talk about my work, especially with somebody who's so enthusiastic about it. So I really appreciate it. And it's just been delightful.
This was awesome. If you love this episode, send me some feedback, jump on Instagram, jump on Apple, jump on Spotify, leave me some stars. Let us know what you loved about it. And if you do take action on any of these things, whether it be a frame or feedback or looking at your comfort zone and where you can learn, your learning zone, I would love to know. because that's what this is all about.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Let me
tuning
know
in.
too.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.